So good morning, everyone. So, as Pamela introduced me, I am Gabriela Heck. I am a PhD student in education from Brazil, and I'm doing this PhD sandwich, which means that part of this I do in Brazil, part of this I do in other country, and then back to Brazil. And I am doing this for 6 months until January. And she invited me to talk with you to give you some explanation about how we do research in other place other than UK, and my experience in research in my master's. So I think before we start, I want to show you a little bit about my background. So how did I came up here, and maybe it can inspire you in some way. So I did an undergraduate in biological science, and when I was doing this, I did a mandatory class called Brazilian Sign Language. We call it Libras. So it's the language that we used to speak with the deaf community in Brazil. And this kind of changed the way I was thinking about biology and the way I was thinking about teaching. And at the same time, I started undergraduate research at the Science Museum that I have in my city. And I started a Libras course. So I started to learn sign language to understand how I can teach for the deaf community in Brazil using the Science Museum as a research. And then in the end of my undergraduate, the master call appeared, and then I thought, oh, maybe I should try a master's trying to relate science museums, people, deaf community, and science teaching. And then I started a master's in science and education back in Brazil, in my university. In Brazil, the masters usually take 2 years, and here I was speaking with some people, it took like 1 year, so it's less. And 2 years is a challenge, so I can imagine how it can be a challenge for you too, to do this in 1 year. And my project initially was aiming to the inclusion of the deaf visitors in Science Museum. So when I started this in 2019, this was my subject. But then in the beginning of 2020, the lockdown happens, and I need to change everything in so less time, in a short period of time. So I want to show that things can happen and things can change in your research, and this is normal, this is okay, and everything will be fine in the end. So just to show you that my plans in the beginning was one, and then I finished doing other thing. So I need to change the subject and my research in the end of 2020 to finally defend my master's in beginning of 2021. So I have actually only 6 months to do my new research, and I could do that. So in the end, everything was fine. And Pamela have these slides, and if you have some interest about my master's research, I have this presentation, but I will not play it now because it's too long, so it can be a little bit boring. But if you have interest, I certainly that Pam can send you. So to contextualize my research, I made a pre-project in 2018 before starting the master's, because I need to send this for the master call, explaining what I want to do. So I have the first version of my research in 2018. And then 2019, I have my initial research, so I changed a little bit from the first version, and I have a second version. This second version, I did a qualification. That is something we do in Brazil. It's like a test. We have experts in your area, they ask questions and they say, okay, your project's fine, you can start doing your research. So the second version of my project, I qualified in February 2020, so it's before the lockdown. Then I had to do this pause in my research between March and June 2020 because of the pandemic, so we were thinking, oh, it will pass, sometime you can start research, but it never happens. So I need to change everything in June 2020, and I did a new project, so the third version of my project. And then this third version I defend in the master's defense, and I have my final dissertation with the third version of my project. So it changed 3 times. So my plans, the original plan was one, and the final plan was another. So my research had at least 3 versions. The one from the pre-project, or before the master's, the one that I qualify, and the one that I defend. So things change. But in each case, in each project, I need to think about a new methodology. So each project, I have to think in a guide question, what I want to do. And I need to define a methodology and a type of research after defining the guide question. Then I need to do a literature review to understand what people are doing in the subject, what Brazilian people are researching, what other international studies are researching. So I did kind of 3 different literature reviews. And then I need to have an ethical approval to apply my research, and finally the application. So it's like a long way until you finally apply your research. And I take this from Pamela's slides. So you need to identify the research area that interests you, and then start reading journal articles about research in this area so you can understand what are being doing and what you can do in your research. And how would you research this area? So you need to, what sort of methodology convinces you? You need to choose the methodology that best fits in your project. So what is best for you? And then you prepare your proposal, submit your assignment. And about my master's, so my project that I defend on, I have my dissertation, I did a case study with 3 Brazilian museums that are accessible and promote activities to deaf visitors. So it's a case study. I used questionnaires, I did interview, and I did a content analysis. So this is the methodology I choose for my work. And the type of data that I collected, some of them was quantitative, so in the questionnaires I asked for some quantitative data, but most part was a qualitative data. So I did interviews, and the content analysis is more like qualitative. And just to show you some examples of my data. So the quantitative I use to build the charts to understand how many activities they do in one place, how many activities and what activities they do in others. And these tables are showing more qualitative data. So this is results from my content analysis. Just to show you, illustrate. And in Canvas, Pamela have a lot of different material that you can use to understand more about the methodology that you want to use. So you can do interviews, focus group, observation, questionnaire, test, documentary analysis, diaries, visual methods. And you can have design strategies and different approaches. So ethnography, surveys, action research, case studies, experiments, comparative, cross-sectional, longitudinal, and many, many others that it doesn't fit in just one slide. But
well done, you found the things on Canvas. So these
yes.
are at the bottom of Canvas, these blocks.
And I will use this material in my PhD because I am going to do interviews, I'm going to do focus group, observation questionnaires, I will apply a test, and I have my diaries. So for my PhD, I will use more resources, more methodology than my master's, and I will certainly use all the things that are on Canvas available to you in my research. So this is a really rich material. And just to show you some outcomes from my master's, because even changing 3 times, even I have just, my final project had 6 months to be concluded, and everything could look like a mess, I have some outcomes from this. So my first project, I did a pilot activity with a deaf visitor in a science museum, and I did an interview, and I analyzed by the analysis content. And I didn't use these results in my dissertation because the project changed, but I was able to use the data that I collected and the results in a book chapter, in a book called Accessibility in Museums and Science Center, Experiences, Studies and Challenges. So I was able to use the material that I collected in the first version of the project to do something that can be useful for other people. And from the second version, the one that I qualified, I did a literature review, and I didn't use this in my dissertation, so I published this in a Brazilian journal, and it's a Brazilian journal specified in deaf education, so it kind of fits well in the journal, and it's called The Use of Brazilian Sign Language to Promote Inclusion in Museums, Reviewing the Literature. And from the final version, the one that I defend in 2021, I did a presentation in an international congress. It was online, so ISERA is the congress. and I submit a paper in another Brazilian journal with the title is Science Popularization Accessible to the Visitors in Brazilian Museums. So I was able to use all the data that I collected and that I didn't use to write my dissertation, I used to publish in other areas of research in Brazil. And so the final dissertation is here. I'll put the link, but we only have the abstract in English, but if you have any curiosity to understand a little bit more, this is the face of the final dissertation.
Yeah, I don't think we've got any Portuguese speakers.
No.
Yet. Have we? No.
No, yeah, so if unfortunately just like the abstract are in English, the title is in English, but all the rest is in Portuguese. But that was it. I was just trying to show you a little bit about my experience as a Brazilian researcher and with my master's, and show you that things can change and in the end it will be okay. So that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.